Ruth was never meant to survive that day. She and her family had been part of a group moving south to start afresh. They had spent about a week traveling, and as the initial excitement began to wear off, everyone started to feel the fatigue associated with the long, tedious journey. The wagons had stopped just beyond a stretch of woodland where a narrow stream ran hidden between the rocks. It was very tempting, and she just couldn't ignore. She wanted more than anything to have a proper bath, even if it meant in cold water, so she wandered just a little further than she was supposed to. She lost track of time, and while she waited for her clothes to dry, she napped peacefully under the shade of a tree. At first, she thought she was dreaming, but the gunshots finally woke her up. Disoriented, she haphazardly wore her damp clothes and carefully crept back toward camp, and that was when she saw them. Men on horseback, faces covered, movements swift and merciless as they destroyed everything and everyone. Ruth dropped behind a cluster of rocks, her hand clamped over her mouth as the world she knew was torn apart before her eyes as she watched them take everything, leaving nothing behind. Ruth stayed hidden hours after the men had gone and the smoke had settled. As she sat there behind the rocks, her eyes stung, her whole body trembled, but she couldn't move. It was as if she was frozen in time. She stared sightlessly until she fell into a deep slumber, her body's way of giving her brief reprieve. By the time another group found her, she was curled up on the ground, all cried out, feeling hopeless and empty. The men were not kind men, not in the way her family had been, but they were not cruel either. They gazed at her, then assessed the situation before them. Without saying anything, the men hitched their horses and got to work digging a giant hole so they could lay to rest the slain. Everyone Ruth had been traveling with was gone. Mama, Papa, her little brothers and grandmother, Reverend Wallace and his family, the retired sheriff, Lincoln and his new bride, and the others. Even though she didn't think she had any more tears left, Ruth could feel her eyes burn and water. Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to stand up and watch as they were laid in the earth. She even scooped up some sand and poured into the gaping grave before the men covered it up. Ruth later discovered that the men were hunters with unfinished business. They had been chasing the same bandits who destroyed her life. And for reasons she didn't understand, they let her stay. Maybe it was pity, maybe it was something else. All she knew was that she didn't want to be alone either. The men had promised Ruth that no matter how long it took, they would make sure the bandits were brought to justice. Among them was a young man who smiled easily. Ruth felt more comfortable around him. He was gentle and patient, safe. She found herself drawn to him until she was told that he was promised to another, and so she turned her attention away, or tried to, because there was someone else, someone she didn't want to notice. A man who didn't soften his words, who didn't treat her like she was fragile and would break at any point in time. He looked at her not with pity, but with understanding, for he too had lost his family. The bandits had taken the lives of his pregnant wife and child. Garrick was his name, but she silently nicknamed him Cold Green because of his intense gaze. He must have sensed her reservations about him because he also kept his distance and stayed away, which was fine with her. By the time they reached the town, decisions had already been made. Once Ruth had no say in. For her protection, stability, and survival, she was to be married. To him, to Garrick. the very man who unsettled her the most. Ruth protested, but she knew it was of no use. Their reasons were logical, and hers were solely based on emotions, they pointed out. She also discovered that Garrick had put up quite a fight too, but fate had decided, and there was nothing either of them could do about it. Garrick's mother and sister were excited about the wedding and didn't let the bride nor the groom's lack of enthusiasm diminish their joy. Whether arranged or not, it meant Garrick would have someone in his life again, and there was always hope that love could grow, even from the coldest marriage. But from the moment the vows were spoken, they fought. Every day, in every conversation, even in the silence, because Ruth was determined to make him miserable enough to want to end the charade. She knew that loving him would mean risking everything again, and she had already lost too much. But hatred is a fragile thing. It breaks under the weight of truth, because there were moments where it was glaring that the human heart beat strongly beneath Garrick's tough facade. He wasn't always gentle with her, but he was honest. He challenged her and didn't let her wallow in self-pity and despair. And through it all, he never once tried to make her feel smaller than she was. Ruth was angry with the way her heart betrayed her, and even though she would never say it out loud, she was beginning to depend on him, on his strength and integrity and kindness, for truly he was kind to her. Then the war came. The same bandits had been found, and this time there would be no running. The night before the men left, Ruth and Garrick had an argument, like always, but this time it was different. There was no holding back. Ruth couldn't hide her fear, her anger, her need to be free. "I want a divorce," she told him. "No," he replied. "It's for your own good." The way he was so calm about it made her angrier, and something inside her snapped. "It is not your place to decide for me. I am your husband, and I'm trying to protect you. I don't need your protection." Garrick did not respond to her outburst. Instead, he picked up his bags. "I don't know what will happen out there, but at least for now, my name and my home will keep you protected." "I said I don't need your protection. I hate being married to you, and you cannot keep me against my will. I want a divorce." His expression hardened as his cold gaze burned into her. "I'll see you in a few days." Just like that, he had dismissed her request like she was a petulant child. That was when the words came, the very ones she would never be able to take back. "Go then," she flung the words at him, "and don't come back. In fact, I hope you never come back." The moment the words left her lips, she knew it was a lie, but the damage had already been done. For a second, his mask cracked, and she could see that her careless words had found their mark. But pride held her still. Garrick gave her a curt nod, whether in farewell or to acknowledge what she had said. Ruth did not know. Then he turned and walked out into the darkness. Days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into something heavier, quieter. For all her angry pride, Ruth waited for news from the battlefield. She was grateful to have Garrick's mother and sister by her side, the three of them taking turns to encourage each other as they hoped for the best while expecting the worst. Finally, men began to return. Wounded, broken, some didn't return at all, and for the first time, Ruth understood the cost of the world she had been forced into, the cost of revenge and the cost of love. When Garrick finally returned, he was barely alive. He was carried, his skin pale and his face covered in cuts and bruises. He looked like he was caught somewhere between this world and the next. Relief hit her first, then guilt, then fear, because the last thing he had heard from her was that she wished him dead. Garrick was taken to his parents' house, and though she tried to see him, his family refused. Apparently, his family had heard about what transpired between them that last night they were together. "You've done enough," they told her. And when he was finally conscious, he sent her the divorce papers just like she had asked. Only now, she didn't want them. Ruth waited for 3 days. 3 days of pacing and hovering outside their home like an ignored beggar. 3 days of being turned away. "He's resting," they would say, or "he's not ready. He doesn't want to see you," his sister told her, and that was the only truth that mattered. On the 4th day, Ruth stopped asking. She simply opened the door and walked in before anyone could stop her. His father got up from his chair, startled. "You can't just—" "I'm not leaving," she interrupted, her voice steady, though her hands trembled at her sides. "I'm going to stay here," she continued, stepping fully into the room, "until he sends me away himself." After a long tense silence, his mother stepped aside from the doorway leading to the back rooms. The room was dim and smelt of herbs and iron. Garrick, looking thin and weak, was slightly propped on the bed, bandages wrapped tight around his torso. His eyes were open and they were on her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Ruth had imagined this, what she would say, how she would begin, but everything disappeared under the weight of his gaze. He was looking at her like she was a stranger. "You shouldn't be here," he finally said. His voice was rough and weak. Ruth swallowed. "I know." She bravely took a step closer. "I heard what happened," she said, her words fragile. "I didn't know if you would survive," he finished for her. Ruth nodded. "I almost didn't," he told her. Her breath caught. "I remember it," he continued, his eyes still on hers. "I remember lying there and thinking, that was it." His fingers curled slightly against the blanket. "And the last thing I heard from you," Ruth's chest tightened, "was that you hoped I'd die." There was utter silence as tears blurred her vision, but Ruth didn't look away. "I didn't mean it," she whispered. His gaze sharpened slightly. "No? No." Her voice broke, but she forced herself to continue. "I was angry. I was afraid. And I said the cruelest thing I could think of because I knew it would hurt you." Something flickered in his expression, but he did not speak. "I was wrong," she said. "Not just for that. For everything." She took another step closer. "I kept fighting you because it was easier than facing what I felt. Because if I admitted it, if I let myself care, then I could lose you too." Her voice softened. "And I don't think I could survive that again." He watched her intently, then said, "You didn't lose me." Ruth let out a small broken laugh. "Didn't I?" He did not respond to that. Then quietly, in a tone laced with pain, she said, "You sent the papers." His jaw tightened. "Yes, I did." "Do you want me to sign them?" The unexpected question hung between them. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Is that what you want?" Ruth shook her head as tears freely ran down her face. "No," she replied. "But if you want me to sign them," she drew in a shaky breath, "I will do it. I won't fight you." For the first time, something in his composure cracked. "You have been fighting me since we got married," he told her, his voice low. "I know. And now you choose not to?" "Because This isn't about winning anymore, she responded, her voice quiet but steady. There was a long pause. Then, look at me, he said. Ruth stepped forward until she was at the edge of the bed, making sure she was careful, like he might break, or like she might. I meant what I said, she whispered, before he could continue talking. Her hand hovered before she gently placed it over his. I don't want to lose you. She saw and felt the way her words affected him, and for the first time since she entered the room, the distance between them lessened. It was not completely gone, but it was no longer unbridgeable. Gary turned his hand palm up and grasped hers. The way she held on as if her life depended on that connection made him smile a little. Do you want to try again? This time for real, he asked, his sharp gaze taking in her reaction as she smiled through her tears. I would love that, she replied, but he sensed something was holding her back. But he raised a dark brow in question. But I need you to forgive me first. When he didn't answer immediately, Ruth felt a sharp dart of fear rip through her until she realized that the hand still holding hers was weakly tugging her. She leaned down towards her husband, thinking he wanted to whisper something in her ear, but he lifted his other hand and turned her head so he could press a kiss to her lips. It was a quiet promise that their marriage was going to take a turn in the right direction. Yes, she had been forgiven, and now she had a chance at happiness, and Ruth silently vowed to do everything in her power to make it up to him. If this story moved you, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Also, tell me in the comments, have you ever said something you wish you could take back? See you in our next story. Bye.